I never know what to wear. Nothing looks good on me.
School should not be this hard. Other people don't have to struggle like this.
I'm last to pick up my kids again. What's wrong with me?
No one cares if I'm around. Would anyone even notice if I wasn't here?
I never.
I won't.
I'm not.
I can't.
These are the words that fill our heads every day. The thoughts we don't like to admit we even have. The feelings that discourage and hold us back. But it doesn't have to be this way. The negative thoughts in our heads don't have to hold us captive any longer. God has given us all the promises we need to crash the chatterbox.
Well, good morning, 9:30. How you doing? You guys are like the hardcore Christians, aren't you? You're here, first service, time change Sunday. You must really love Jesus. Did you get your coffee this morning? Are you ready for a good service? 2 of you. That's wonderful. Yes, I'm so glad I'm here. Okay, I am glad you're here. I've already gotten all jacked up on my Jesus juice, so I'm ready to go, and I'm ready to preach God's word for you this morning. All right, so we're here. This is week number 2 of this series called Crash the Chatterbox, and last week we have a couple of declarations. Last week our declaration was God says I am, and we talked about insecurity. And if you kind of have ever had that thought, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't have what it takes, go back, listen to last week because he says you are. You know what I'm talking about? And so we deal with that insecurity in that way. This week, we're going to turn the corner a little bit, and we're going to talk about fear. We're going to look at how fear plays a role in our life and how God says he will. So the theme of today, or the phrase, the declaration we want to make today is, God says he will. And oftentimes, our future is one of the number one causes of our fear, right? I'm worried about what's going to happen. And so the chatterbox starts chattering kind of around in our head, right? They're never going to love you. Your future, you're never going to become all that God, you can never accomplish what God called you to do. And the chatterbox starts to bring about fear. Now, here's one of the premises of this series, is that the voice we listen to determines our destiny. So if we start listening to the chatterbox, that voice of fear in our life, we're gonna end up with that destiny. Don't listen to that voice. Instead, listen to the promises of God. Listen to the voice of God that we read about in his word. And in those promises of God, we'll have a different destiny. We'll have the destiny that God always chose for us. So when you have the choice between the chatterbox and God, always lean towards God. Because the chatterbox just wants to stop you, wants to slow you down. So listen to the voice of God. And so this week, we're going to go to the book of Acts chapter 27, and we're going to read about one of my favorite characters. His name is Paul. Now, Paul is a pretty incredible guy. He didn't write this story, but we're going to experience a little bit of his life as a follower of Jesus. Now, at this point, Paul is a prisoner headed to Rome because he's standing trial before Caesar. He's supposed to stand trial before Caesar. So they put him on a ship and they send him across the Mediterranean. But this was not like a Mediterranean cruise where you're going to sip wine on the Italian countryside, okay? This is a ship with 275 other people, most of which are prisoners. And he is on his way to Rome to stand trial there. And now he is in a storm. The ship is caught in the storm. And look what it says. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them, check out this warning, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to the ship and cargo and to our own lives also." Debbie Downer Paul, right? Like he goes, it's all going to go wrong, guys, okay? And then it continues. But the centurion, who was the Roman guard in charge of Paul, the other prisoners, and really the one who made the decisions on the ship, the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship, which you would kind of go, of course you would, right? Like, how many of you would listen to me or your doctor when you're in the doctor's office, right? Like sometimes preachers think they know more than they really do. You ever know? I believe me, I met a lot of preachers, and some of them, yeah, well, anyway. Okay, but we sometimes we talk and we just talk to talk, okay? But not me, the other guys, okay? Check this out. So he was talking, and they didn't believe him. And so since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that they would sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix in winter there. This was a harbor in Crete facing both southwest and northwest. And so you get the scenario, right? They're in the ship and they've gotten caught. They've had some inclement weather. They've lost some time and they're trying to make a decision. Do we stay here for the winter or do we try to make this next place for the winter? And Paul's going, don't go. Don't do it. It's not a good idea. And the pilot says, and the boat's owner says, and I love how it says, the majority decided that we should make this choice, that we should go. We should go with it. Now, I'm going to bring up a couple of points this morning. I've actually got 3 points this morning. When it comes to facing fear, when it comes to making decisions in your life about your future, and sometimes these difficult choices that we have in life, I want you to do what Paul did and not what the centurion did, okay? So number 1, check this out. If you're taking notes, write this down. Steer by faith, not your feelings. Steer by faith, not your feelings. Or another way you could say it, steer by the Spirit, not your senses. Steer by the Spirit of God, not what you sense. The centurion was listening to the pilot, and the pilot's going, hey, I think we can make it. The majority's deciding, I think we can make it. But Paul's going, wait. God has been speaking to me, and I don't think we're going to make it. I don't think it's going to go so well. And there are times in our life when we've let our feelings steer, and haven't they led us astray more than once? Like somebody makes you mad, and you type out that email, right? Your feelings are like, all up in there, and you hit send, and what happened? Nothing good happened, I can tell you that much, right? That text you never should have sent, the words you never should have spoken, the place you never should have gone. Oftentimes, all of those things are on your feelings or your senses or what you feel in the moment, not by the Spirit of God, not by faith working through you. It is so important that we look through the eyes of faith. Starting this church was one of the biggest steps of faith I've ever taken in my entire life. Leah and I were asking God, okay, God, what's next for us? We were looking for a calling from God. We're like, God, what do you have for us? And we felt this inkling to start a church. And I thought, God, you are crazy. You don't even know. You don't even know me, God. Like, seriously, you want me to start a church? Listen, God, let me tell you all the reasons it's not going to work. This is my feelings. This is my senses. God, I'm still in my 20s. I don't know much. I have never been a lead pastor of a church before, so I don't have what that takes. And you want me to take my whole life savings, which, was all of like $7,000 at that point. Like I just didn't have much money. And you want me to rent a middle school and ask people to come and see if anyone shows up. Yeah, this is a terrible idea. This is not going to work. And my senses, my feelings were telling me, this is a bad idea. But the Spirit of God said something different. He says, you can make it. I'm going to be there with, this is my calling. And so over the course of time, we said, okay, God, this is what you want us to do? If it fails, we'll just move away forever and never see anyone else. And we'll just leave, let's leave town with our tail between our legs, right? So we're going to do it. We're going to take a step of faith. And I'm going to tell you, I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad because I get to stand here now and talk to you. I get to see people's lives change every single week. I get to see people make decisions for Christ every single week right here. I get to see people's hearts grow and their marriages be restored. And I get to see that face to face. Why? Because I decided that I was going to let God steer instead of myself, instead of the senses. Acts 27 continues with this, the story continues like this. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity. They're like, oh yeah, let's take that shot. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before long, a wind of hurricane force called a nor'easter swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind, so we gave way to it and were driven along. How many times is that your fears? You're like, oh yeah, it's a gentle south breeze. Oh, we're just going to go this way. We're going to do our thing. And then, boom, the nor'easter comes. The fear sets in. The circumstance happens. And all of a sudden, you give way to it and you're just driven along by fear. No longer making decisions or taking action, but everything you do is a reaction to the fear that's coming into your life. It just kind of hits you out of nowhere and you're going, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know if I have what it takes. And so they were driven along. As we passed the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure, so the men hoisted it aboard. Let's continue. Then they passed the ropes under the ship itself to hold it together. They're so worried. They're wrapping the ropes. The fear is driving them. They're reacting to the storm to hold together. Because they were afraid, they would run aground on the sandbars of Syrtis. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. That's crazy, right? That describes my fear. When fear comes in my life, I just get taken away by it. And the verse continues like this. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. Does this make sense? We're in the middle of a storm. Don't we need the ship's tackle to, I don't know, steer the ship? Like, if we ever do get out of this, how are we going to manage the ship? They didn't see any hope in the situation. They're throwing it. How many times have we wasted cargo and tackle and whatever else in our life, that we've wasted money and effort and worry in the midst of fear? We're saying, oh, this incredible bad situation is upon us, and in your life you just start hucking stuff out of the boat. You're killing relationships. You're saying things you shouldn't have said. You're spending money on things that you think will start to make the problem better, but you're not. We're just tossing it overboard, right? You been there? You don't have to raise your hand. Okay, don't worry. I know. We do that, don't we? We start tossing stuff all over the place with our own hands. But then, check this out. He continues, when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, the storm continued raging. We finally gave up all hope of being saved. We gave up all hope. You know what one of the clinical definitions of the definition of clinical depression is that you never see your situation getting better, any better than it is right now. You've given up all hope of being saved. It's not even a possibility anymore. This is your current reality, and it'll never change. And that's where they are right now. We finally gave up all hope of being saved. But what's funny about this statement is that we finally gave up. That was that was Luke writing on behalf of Paul. Luke was beside Paul, and he's going, we gave up all hope. And I think Paul would have leaned over and been like, I didn't give up hope, right? Because look what he says next. Look what he says. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, check out what he says, men, you should have taken my advice and not sailed from Crete. He's going to preach a sermon here. But men, like guys in this room, is this not your wife's favorite verse? Look at this. Men, you should have taken my advice. Ladies, you should probably frame that one. Okay, okay. Men, you should have taken my advice and not sailed from Crete. You would have spared yourselves this damage and loss. He kind of stands up and he goes, okay, we've got some issues here. Remember when I told you not to steer by your feelings, but to steer by faith instead? You made the wrong choice, and you would have spared yourself some of this loss. When it comes to this situation in life, how many of you know it's really hard to kind of go to God in this situation? Like if God got me into a storm, I know that God can get me out of the storm. Like I did not create the recession. I just have to live through it. So I go, okay, God, thank you for helping me through this. I did not create the inclement weather on my road trip. God, I need you to get me through this. It's easy to turn to God in those situations. But what about when it was your own hands that threw the tackle overboard? It was your own decision that got you in the storm in the first place. Is it easy to go to God then? You kind of go, oh man, I screwed up and I don't even know if God can help me now. Right? Don't we do that? Well, like it's kind of like a speeding ticket. Like you're driving along, you see the blue lights flashing in your rearview mirror, and you're like, do I pray to get out of it or not? I mean, it really is my fault. I totally was speeding. Like, what do I do? It's that situation over and over again. It's like when you lose your job, and you just tell everyone else, oh, my boss never liked me, but deep down you really know that you're probably more lazy than you should have been. What do you do? Do you say, oh, God, sorry, help me out? Well, what about when your relationship is on the rocks and you know that you really could have done more? Or your kid is rebelling and you really could have invested more in their life, or your financial state is bad and you really could have managed your budget better. In those moments, isn't it hard to go to God and go, will you help me? I'm so sorry, God, for not doing what I was supposed to be doing when I was supposed to be doing it. God, can you get me out? And this is the situation that these people find themselves in, driven by fear. And finding themselves in a situation that they created with their own two hands. Those are the hardest ones to walk out of, isn't it? But the most beautiful thing about God, and I truly find this as a beautiful thing, one of the most beautiful things about God is that out of like 7 billion people on the planet, he chooses to lean in and listen to my heart. And he looks at me and he says, even though you created this, I still love you. And I still have a plan for you. And I still want the best for you. And I'm going to help you walk through this. I'm going to give you the courage to endure this. I'm going to deliver you from where you are right now. I'm going to set you free, which is incredible, isn't it? That's a beautiful thing about God, that even though my hands got me there, his hands can get me out. He still loves me that much. Number two, this is the next thing we're going to learn this morning. Number two, have courage over conditions. Sometimes our conditions are not good, right? The ship is breaking apart. You're trying to tie ropes around it to keep it together, right? You're throwing the tackle overboard. You're trying to keep it all together. But Paul stands up in this verse, in the next verse. He says, have courage. In the midst of all of the raging storm, in the midst of the ship being battered and beaten, in the midst of your poor decision making, have courage. Verse 22, he picks it up. He says right here, but now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Paul stands up and he says, buck up, buddies. I've got good news and I've got bad news. Good news, you're not going to die. Bad news, ship's going to die. It's just not going to make it. You're going to make it, the ship won't. But he says, keep your courage up, which makes me think they have courage, they just weren't using it well. Does that make sense? Keep your courage up. You already have courage, you just need to feed it. Because in any situation we find ourselves in, we can feed our courage or we can feed our fear. We can't do both at the same time. So he's saying, stop feeding your fear and start feeding your courage. Stop feeding the off of the boat, because the boat's not going to save you. Not anymore. But put your courage in God, the one who created the tree that the wood came from that created the boat. You know, don't put your hope in the boat. When we put our hope in the boat to deliver us, there should be fear. But when you put your faith in God and him to be the one who delivers us, there's going to be a peace. There's going to be courage. So think about it like this. We may not literally travel around on boats around here, very often anyway, but how many times do we put our hope in something other than God? The sailors would put their hope in the boat, and it didn't work out well. But for us, how many times do we put our hope in our bank account? When the bank account goes down, so does our courage. We put our hope in a relationship, and when that relationship starts to deteriorate, what happens? Our courage goes down too. We put our hope in something. Maybe it's a career. Maybe it's a job that we have. Maybe it's a calling in life. And when that starts to not go the way we decided it should go, our courage goes down with it. Why? Because our hope wasn't in God. It was in the thing. It was in the boat. It was in the bank account. It was in the career. It was in the house or the car that you always had to have, right? And our courage goes up and down based on circumstances, but do not go with circumstances. Have courage over the circumstances. Put your faith in him. Check it out, Matthew chapter 14. Peter, one of Jesus' disciples, found himself in a situation like that. He's in a storm. He's with the other disciples. He's on a boat, and Jesus comes walking by on the water. I know you've heard this story before, right? Jesus is walking by on the water, and Peter says, hey, Jesus, if that's really you, call me out. And this is what he says. Come, he said. Jesus said, come. Then Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. That is an incredible statement, right? Just, he was walking on the water as if it were land, just walking. But what happened? But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Lord, save me. Now, what happened in Peter? His focus was on Jesus, and he's like, sweet, I'm getting out of this boat. I'm walking on water. Yes. He's doing one of these. But then what happened? His focus went a different direction, didn't it? It says he saw the wind. Now, let me ask you this question. If there was no wind, could Peter have walked on water? No. The wind had nothing to do with him walking on water. He can't walk on water. Jesus is the only one that could allow him to walk on water. And if he had kept his eyes on Jesus the whole time, it didn't matter what was happening in the world. That was the only means by which he was going to walk on the water. How many times in our life have we taken our focus off of Jesus and started to sink? We put our focus on the bank account or the situation or the relationship or the this or that. We take our focus and we put it anywhere else, and we begin to sink. Our courage begins to dwindle and our fear begins to rise. Keep your eyes fixed on him. Hebrews chapter 6 verse 19 gives us an awesome just a word picture for us. It says, we have this hope, which is the promises of God. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. When the wind of life is trying to blow you away, pull out the anchor of hope and tie it around your waist. You know what I'm talking about? When the storm's trying to sweep you away, I got my anchor, and you can blow all you want, but I'm feeding on the courage that Jesus has given me. Tying it around my waist. The bank account may be low, but I got hope. That relationship may not be going well, but I've got hope. I've tied it around my waist because the anchor is hope for my soul. Firm and secure. And though the chatterbox might start, I've still got it. I've still got his hope anchored around me. And you can stand firm. You know, when we started this church, the Chatterbox started to sing his favorite song. What if, what if, what if? You ever been there? Isn't that what feeds your fears? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if, you know what I'm talking about? I'd be lying if I told you that I had perfect faith and I never had one question about starting this church. I'd be lying. I had so many questions. I had so many what ifs, and I just knew I should. And there were times at 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning, I'm going, well, what if nobody shows up? That was the number one hit for the Chatterbox in my head. What if no one shows up to this church, your imaginary church you haven't even started yet? What if no one shows up? And then one day, it came to me. For every what if the Chatterbox has, God has an even if. For every what if nobody shows up, he's got even if no one shows up, I still called you to it. Right? And I got to tell you, when we opened the doors of the church, people showed up. And all those fears weren't realized. And so the Chatterbox had to sing a new song. What if you never grow? What if you never get more people to come to the church and you don't get to reach anyone? And God gave me a new song. Even if no one else shows up, I'll still be the best pastor of 100 people I know how to be. Even if we never grow, I'm still going to preach the gospel and have God use me to help change people's lives. Even if. And now the song has changed again because we have grown. We're in 2 services. We're reaching more people. People commit their lives to Christ every week. New people walk through our doors every week. Lives are being changed every single week. And now the question, or now the what if is totally different. It's that, well, what if everyone leaves? You see how he has to change his song again and again because you keep walking in faith and he can't get you down? What if everyone leaves? Well, let's play this again. Even if everyone leaves, I'm still called by God. And even if everyone leaves, I still must preach the gospel because that's what he's put on my life. Even if everyone else leaves, that is the calling that God has given me. So it doesn't really matter all the what ifs. I can stare them in the face and say, even if the worst case scenario happens, even then, God is still God. What's happening in your life? What are the what ifs going through your mind? What if, fill in your blank, and then respond with an even if. Even if that does happen, I have a hope that's an anchor for my soul, that is firm and secure in my God. Have courage over conditions. Number 3, check this out. Know that God is beside you. This is where my courage comes from. That I'm not doing it on my own, that I have a God who stands beside me. And so Paul is having this little sermonette in the middle of a storm, and the ship is about to break apart, and he's saying the ship will be lost, but you're going to make it. And he continues with this passage in verse 23. He picks it up right here. He says, last night, an angel of the God whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me. He stood beside me. He was not with me in the future, waiting for me in Rome. He wasn't on the dock where I left, but he was right there in the midst of a boat that was being broken apart in the middle of a storm. He was right there with me. He said, stood beside me, and he said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar. You know what God's doing to Paul right now? He's taking his eyes off the now and putting it on the then. He's saying, I've got a promise for you then, which means you have to make it through today. I've got a plan for you then, which means today you're going to make it. Because I've got a higher calling on your life then, so now is going to be okay. And so he takes his eye, you've got to stand before Caesar, and God graciously has given you the lives of all who sail with you. And so let's keep going on this verse. It says, so keep up your courage, men. He's telling them again, be filled. Be filled with courage. Keep up your courage, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island. Nevertheless, it's not going to be the way you decided it was going to be. Like you want to just cruise into the harbor, put down anchor, break out the Corona, and have a beach party. Not going to happen. It's not going to happen. In fact, the ship's not going to make it. But the good news is only the ship won't make it. But you are. But you are. And in the midst of this, in the midst of your worst day, your worst fear, God is still beside you. He is still pointing towards your future, saying, this is what I have for you. There's a old gospel song that I just grew up loving. When I was early in ministry, in my early 20s, we would play this song in our morning prayer time. And it always spoke to me. And I've got to be honest with you, I'm like one of the whitest people in the entire world. All right, so gospel music probably shouldn't be like a genre that I appreciate, but this song, I really, really did appreciate it because every time it would come on, I would just love the words to it. Can I share this song with you this morning? It's called "My Life Is in Your Hands." Will you pull up the lyrics? Okay. So this song, I'm not a vocalist. Can I be honest with you? And will you forgive me if I try to sing it a little bit? No, you have to forgive me, okay? But I wanted to share with you the essence of this song. And I'll stop singing if I get way off, okay? All right, you guys ready? But listen to these words. You don't have to worry, and don't you be afraid. Joy comes in the morning. Troubles, they don't last always. For there's a friend named Jesus who will wipe your tears away. And if your heart is broken, just lift your hands and say, I know that I can make it. I know that I can stand. No matter what may come my way, my life is in your hands. That's beautiful, isn't it? My life is in his hands. Thank you for bearing with me for a second. I would rather speak to 10,000 people than to do that. But the truth is, my life is in his hands. It's not in the boat. It's not in the storm. It's not in these hands or my ability, but it's in his hands. My life is in his hands. And today, your life is in his hands. In the midst of the hardest circumstance you could find yourself in, he's there beside you. And today, I'm going to ask you to do something with me. If you feel like he isn't beside you, like there's some distance between you and him, I can promise you this. It's not because he left you, but because maybe we've distanced ourselves from him. And today, I'm going to ask you to come back to him with me. Just to come back and restore a relationship with God that you thought was long gone. Like God has given up on you, but I'm going to tell you this morning, your life is in his hands. He has never given up on you. And today, I'm going to pray a prayer with you that says, God, I trust my life to your hands. I give you everything I am. I'm making you the Lord of my life. Forgive me of my past. I give you my present and my future. If you don't mind, let's close our eyes and bow our heads so nobody's distracted, nobody moving around. Let's just pray this together. Father, right now I pray that you would give me forgiveness of all the things in my past, and I pray that right now, as I trust my life to you, that you would bring me grace, bring me forgiveness, bring me hope like an anchor to my soul, firm and secure in the midst of the storms and the trials. And I know you're there. I know you're right beside me because I am trusting my life to you, Jesus. Thank you, God. In your name we pray. Amen.